My name is Sartini. I'm an English teacher, and welcome to my online classroom, a space where we read and analyze works of English literature to better understand how to live. Today, we're doing a summary and analysis of Chapter 3 in F. Scott Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby. Chapter number 3 begins with Nick. He's going to a party of the illustrious, mysterious, greatest of all, the Gatsbys. And at this party, you've got everything you can imagine, from rich cars to inside of a giant mansion to the wealthiest people all throughout New York City. And we're having a blast listening to jazz music, listening to big bands. It's quite the time. There's lots of alcohol everywhere, despite it being the Prohibition era. So this man is clearly just the highest tier of all high tier wealth, if all of the other high-tiered people are coming to his home, right? If the entire New York City, all the money within the entire realm of New York is at this one place, it's almost like they're going to church in a sense. They're going to the church of partying, the greatest cathedral devoted toward a rousing good time as one could possibly imagine, right? So Nick says, and it's a very interesting observation he has, that he was actually personally invited. None of these other people got here because of a personal invitation, nor has anyone ever gotten here from a personal invitation. It's only Nick. And Nick meets Jordan Baker at this party, and she says, or sort of alludes to, that she thinks she might be the only person who knows of Gatsby or has actually talked to him before. And then another woman comes over and she starts saying some rumors. Another girl loads up some more rumors. And we've got, so basically no one there we have identified actually knows who Gatsby is. They haven't been invited here. And they all just have different rumors of who they think Gatsby might be and how they think he's gotten his wealth. Eventually, Nick does bump in to Gatsby, and Gatsby confirms that he sent an invitation, that he's actually quite interested in Nick. And why he might be interested in Nick, we'll talk about that soon. On Nick's way to meet Gatsby, he meets another man named Owl Eyes, and instead of partying, he's sort of out looking at a variety of books in Gatsby's library. When they do meet Gatsby, he tells them that he doesn't drink, which sort of differentiates himself from the crowd of people there. And then some cars, I believe, get into a wreck and are stuck in a ditch outside, which could be a symbolism for the stock market of the 1920s. Who knows? Not me, but I'm going to try to figure it out. And I'm glad that you're here with me. Let's get started with the quotes. So, opening up with Nick's invitation. He says here, "I believe that in the first night I went to Gatsby's house, I was one of the few guests who had actually been invited. People were not invited, they went there." Okay, so we have this mysterious character and all of these, hundreds and hundreds of luxurious individuals at his house. They just show up and expect there to be a party for hundreds of people on a night-to-night basis. So the level of wealth this man has to have, the level of connections, the level of intrigue that must be continued would be absurd. To host a party once a week, that seems like quite a bit of things to do, but every single day consistently providing, resources that are in the tens of thousands of dollars likely per night is ridiculous. And those people just sort of show up and they expect to have a good time. They went there. Rather, Nick got invited. Why might that be? He says, quote, "I'd actually been invited. A chauffeur in a uniform of robin's egg blue crossed my lawn early that Saturday morning with a surprisingly formal note from his employer. The honor would be entirely Gatsby's, it said, if I were to attend his little party that night." That's very humble to say a little party when it's Prohibition era, alcohol's banned, and you have seemingly all of it. Very interesting. And why might Nick have gotten invited? Obviously, or one could suppose it to be obvious, that Gatsby needs something that Nick has, or Gatsby wants something that Nick has access to, unlike all of the other guests. And when I was reading this, I sort of remembered that line that just first described Gatsby, that he turned out all right in the end, but it was what preyed on Gatsby, that foul dust floating in his dreams. It's sort of, does Nick have a connection to that foul dust that floats in Gatsby's dreams? Is he somehow the alleviant to help Gatsby overcome what preys upon him, I wonder? Next, we're talking about the sort of party and descriptions of what might be there and the general tone of intimacy within this realm of hedonistic pleasure. Quote, "I slunk off in the direction of the cocktail table, the only place in the garden where a single man could linger without looking purposeless and alone." So Nick is like, I'm the only person that's been invited here. I know no one. They're a lot more wealthier than I. I'm uncomfortable. Let's drink. So we're seeing here alcohol is used as a mechanism to hide discomfort, to hide someone from the feeling of feeling alone. It's to sort of mask the pain that disunity brings to a person. And then he meets a Miss Jordan Baker in the midst of his alcoholic splendor. And she says to him, "I like large parties. They're so intimate. At small parties, there isn't any privacy." Now that's odd. So parties are intimate places, and this is said in the height of Nick feeling a loneliness. And he's saying that, well, Jordan rather is saying that large parties are a place of intimacy. But we're physically seeing Nick be confused and alone in the height of lack of intimacy, lack of connection, lack of anything. He's just alone. So how can you be alone at a large party? And she's saying, well, at small parties, there simply isn't any privacy. Is that true? I don't know. I mean, if I go to a small party and let's say I know everyone there, well, I suppose there is a lack of privacy because in a small place where I know everyone, people that I know would be coming up to me and trying to converse with me at all times. And in a sense, that wouldn't be private. But if you're at a large party where you know no one, how does that make things more intimate? Wouldn't the privacy where people know you and they try to associate you, wouldn't that be a realm of intimacy? So it's odd that she says in a smallness where everyone knows you, there isn't any privacy. I suppose that's true, but wouldn't the small party be the feeling of intimacy? And wouldn't the large party provide the most privacy for you as you know no one and therefore no one would have as great a reason to speak with you? So I found that a really interesting line of, again, that talking point of intimacy and how these characters, desperately crave intimacy, but they can't necessarily grasp it, or they have reversed or inverted meanings about what that feeling of intimacy might be. And then, again, on the topic of intimacy, Nick kind of glances over and sees just a random woman who was, quote, not only singing, she was weeping, too. Most of the women were now having fights with men said to be their husbands. So the women at the party, again, they're sort of singing, but they're also crying. They're screaming, but also potentially having a good time, but also fighting with their partners, and they're generally miserable with, quote, men who are said to be their husbands. So even that is a sort of disconnection between the idea of even being married. Like, oh yeah, that guy, he's like supposed to be married to that other girl, but they're fighting all the time. What? That's ridiculous. Continuing. One of the men was talking with curious intensity to a young actress, and his wife, after attempting to laugh at the situation in a dignified and indifferent way, broke down entirely and resorted to flank attacks. At intervals, she appeared suddenly at his side like an angry diamond and hissed, "You promised!" into his ear. So we can see everyone here, not just Jordan, not just Nick, they're all uncomfortable with this atmosphere in a sense. Or rather, if I'm thinking from the perspective of people cheating on each other, it's sort of like, marriage is in itself an act of submission. So, when I get married to you, we are going hypothetically to a church. I'm saying vows. That means under God, I am vowing to never leave you in sickness and in health. No circumstance can force me to leave you. I'm going to be here for the rest of life as God, a principle higher than me, as my witness. I submit to the fact that you and I are in relationships. That, I believe, is a proper traditional view of marriage. And instead of doing that, they are now in an environment which gives them an abundance of other options. So the original submission, which is my wife is my only focus, has now been diverted to a variety of other avenues simply by seeing people that you never thought to be in existence perhaps at the time. And that's distracting and bringing down your original vows, so to speak. So people are being tested in this environment, and the men seem to be improperly giving into this test of their marriage by, instead of submitting to their wives and promising to remain faithful, now that those connections even themselves are dissolving, and everyone around them as a result is sort of falling apart. And even the women, they know this, and they're trying to laugh and pretend that that isn't a reality, but in fact, that reality is fictitious, and that construct is now breaking down before them. So we can see in a party where there's supposed to be a place with hypothetically joyful connections is actually dissolving as many connections as it would be creating, or dissolving a further rate of connections. than have been or are being created. So even this is sort of a party, a happy place is turning into a bit of a misery due to the lack of intimacy being able to be experienced betwixt its residents, or denizens, rather. A sudden emptiness seemed to flow now from the windows and the great doors, endowing with complete isolation the figure of the host, who stood on the porch, his hand up in a formal gesture of farewell. So we're introduced to the host of Gatsby. Again, he seems like this sort of shadowy figure, and it's described, the room even, as having an emptiness about it. So you sort of have the shadow waving goodbye to the denizens of the party. And it's interesting, the sudden emptiness flowed from the windows and the great doors. And he's talking about, or rather Nick is noting, how isolated all of this feels. So even in the place with the most noise, it's sort of like, this party has to have all of the magic of the wealthy charms in it, because if those are taken away, you're just in a room that has nothing but gives isolation, is all it is. A room that provides isolation. If you were to strip away everything from it, all you would find is misery and nothingness. Moving on. Eventually, Nick says, quote, "As soon as I arrived, I made an attempt to find my host, but the 2 or 3 people of whom I asked his whereabouts stared at me in such an amazed way and denied so vehemently any knowledge of his movements." So again, this goes back to the plot. Why is Nick invited? No one else is invited. Why does Nick know who Gatsby is? I mean, everybody knows who Gatsby is, of course, but they don't know him. They're not a friend. They've never perhaps met him before. People are confused why you would even be looking for Gatsby, as if they don't even expect him to be at his own party. But even if he were at the party, no one would know so much as what he would look like. Moving on to the part where we talk about descriptions of Gatsby and rumors. "I like to come," Lucille said. "I never care what I do, so I always have a good time. When I was here last, I tore my gown on a chair, and he asked me my name and address. Inside of a week, I got a package from the couriers with a new evening gown in it." So the first description of Gatsby we found through the first and second chapters is a shadowy figure. But then this girl says, well, I never knew him before, but I told him that I ripped my gown at the wedding, at the party, and he gave me a brand new dress, 3 times the price of what it was originally worth, and a better model at that. And it was given in about a week or less of time. So Gatsby's someone who's shadowy, but he's also extremely attentive. So we have a contrast again, his mysterious character, but also seems greatly caring and attentive, as if he is, I remember in chapter 1, it's sort of, he's presented as staring at the stars, trying to slice out his place in heaven. So he's sort of like almost a godlike omnipotent figure, where he sees all that's occurring and gives great attention to it, in a sense. So that's some interesting imagery we have. Some further rumors about him. "There's something funny about a fellow who will do something like that," said another girl eagerly. "He doesn't want any trouble with anybody." Now, that's a lot different than my interpretation I just gave. I said, hey, well, maybe this man is super attentive towards the needs of his other people. And this girl said, no. It's not that he doesn't, it's not that he's attentive in itself. It's that he's trying to avoid conflict. So maybe that goes to the theme here of identity and who he tries to present to the world. Maybe he wants to merely be, maybe he wants to merely present the air that he's wealthy, and the air that he is exciting through these parties, and the air that he's very easy to get along with. It's like he's looking to create a perfect brand image of himself, potentially, and won't let any part or any flaw of his personality or his lifestyle or the people with him, no flaws whatsoever, can escape from this narrative that he himself has constructed. A persona, one could say. And then another girl chimes in and says, "Somebody told me they thought he killed a man once. Wasn't he that, quote, he was a German spy during the war?" Interesting. So now we have, again, very attentive to care. No, he just wants to protect his persona. Wait a minute, what is his persona? Didn't he kill a guy? I thought he was working with the Germans during the war. Lots of different contrasts there again. Continuing, "I heard that from a man who knew all about him, grew up with him in Germany." He assured us positively. "Oh, no," said the first girl. "It couldn't be that, because he was in the American army during the war." You look at him sometimes when he thinks nobody's looking. You look at him sometimes when he thinks nobody's looking at him. I'll bet he killed a man." So again, What side was he on during the war? Was he the German Nazis, or was he on the Allies, or is he an American, or was he helping the American army? Is he a war hero? We don't know anything about him. So he's really painted as shadow, but attentive, but protective, but assertive and dominant, but passive and active and evil and heroic. All of these different things at once. That's what creates a mystery. It's this constant up and down, up and down. And this is very different from Nick's personality. Nick had described himself in chapter 1 as a, quote, well-rounded man, which is sort of someone who's good at relatively everything, but never exceptional. Gatsby's got those ups and downs in his personality. That creates a mystery about him, where Nick is more just straightforward. We know what to expect, which is a good contrast, again, even between the two characters. Now, moving on, Nick is scouring through the house along with Jordan, and they're looking for room to find this man. And then they enter upon the library. It says here, quote, "On a chance, we tried an important-looking door and walked into a high Gothic library, paralleled with carved English oak. A stout, middle-aged man with enormous owl-eyed spectacles was sitting somewhat drunk on the edge of a great table, staring with unsteady concentration at the shelves of books. About that. As a matter of fact, you needn't bother to ascertain. I ascertained the real. The books?" He nodded. "Absolutely real. Have pages and everything. I thought they'd be nice, durable cardboard. Matter of fact, they're absolutely real. Pages, and here, let me show you." So Nick, Jordan, they stumble upon this library. It's gigantic. It's a room that's bigger than all other rooms in the house. And one man is there, a little drunk, a little buzzed. His name is Owl Eyes, or so Nick calls him. And he's reading these books, and he can't get over that the books are real. I believe the comment here is in reference to, well, rich people, they just kind of buy books to look like they're rich. They want to pretend that they're readers to give an allure of wisdom. But in reality, Gatsby actually does seem to be a reader. All of his books are, in fact, real. They have genuine pages. They're not just cardboard cutouts. The entire library is filled with things that look very well read, cared for, attended to, and actually as though someone has been actively reading them for years at a time. So we find out that Gatsby actually, does he even care about the party at all? I mean, is he normally in his library when these things take place? Is this man the genuine, authentic, real deal? Owl Eyes seems to say yes. This is direct evidence that Gatsby may not just be some frivolous party boy, but in reality a very well-disciplined, trained, observant, and well-read man. "Who brought you?" he demanded. "Or did you just come?" "I was brought. Most people were brought. I've been drunk for about a week now, and I thought it might sober me up to sit in the library." So Owl Eyes is saying, yeah, everyone just kind of is brought to this party. We don't have invitations. We don't just know about it and show up. We're taken by someone else. So sort of word of mouth is rippling across the lands and bring all the other eccentric, wealthy millionaires and billionaires to this place. And it's unexpected that one would arrive any other way than to sort of be forced to tag along. Moving on, then we finally have a meeting with Gatsby himself. At a lull in the entertainment, the man looked at me and smiled. "Your face is familiar," he said politely. "Weren't you in the 1st Division during the war?" "Why, yes. I was in the 28th Infantry. I was in the 16th until June 1918. I knew I'd seen you somewhere before." This is Gatsby's first dialogue. What is the dialogue about? It's a connection in a land of complete isolation and disunity. What should be a heathenistic paradise of partying is actually isolation in itself. And the one hope that is brought to Nick is in the form of the connection. Hey, I was in the military. Weren't you as well? I thought I saw you out there back in the Great War. And Nick is incredibly amazed by this because it was the one thing he has in his identity that sort of brought him together with the people in the world, you could say, in a certain sense. It's like this boy grows up so rich in this privileged lifestyle away from everyone. He goes off to war and he finds that he loves it because he actually gets a sense of camaraderie fighting with other people. And he misses that in the world and he's still looking for it. And the place that he least expects it, this wild, heathenistic delight of a party, it's actually found. Not through drugs or alcohol or women, but found a real connection through the war. And that's what Gatsby first says to him. Hey, I understand the world as you understand it. He told me that he had just bought a hydroplane and was going to try it out in the morning. Want to go with me, old sport? Just near the shore, along the Sound. What time? Any time that suits you best. So Gatsby says, hey, I was in the war. You were in the war. Let's be friends. I just bought a plane. Let's go fly that plane together. And he's saying any time that suits you best, which is, I am providing for you. I have access to experience, but I'm giving this to you for something to do that we can share together. So there's sort of a call to intimacy. And it's a very valiant call because he's saying, I want to be intimate, but on your time, not my time, your time. I want to give you a special attention and detail. I'm Gatsby, he said suddenly. What? I exclaimed. Oh, I beg your pardon. I thought you knew, old sport. I'm afraid I'm not a very good host. So now he's seeming very humble. Again, let's do things on your time, not mine. I apologize for not making myself known earlier. Does Gatsby make himself known to other individuals, or is it just Nick? Why is it just Nick? And why is this man so elegant with his words? Is everything pre-planned and pre-staged and fabricated? Or are these events genuinely transpiring moment to moment? Is Gatsby living within the moment, or is he sort of controlled presence? I have the next one highlighted and bolded, so this must be an important quote. He smiled understandingly, much more than understandingly. It was one of those rare smiles with a quality of eternal reassurance in it that you may come across 4 or 5 times in life. It faced or seemed to face the whole eternal world for an instant, and then concentrated on you with an irresistible prejudice in your favor. It understood you just so far as you wanted to be understood, believed in you as you would like to believe in yourself, and assuredly that it had precisely the impression of you that at your best you hoped to convey. So this line, I feel, is very similar to actually a description of Daisy when she first was introduced to Nick. Daisy had a sort of look to her which promised that there was no one else in the world that you'd rather see, or that she wanted to see anyway. So she gives you full idolization with her eyes and with her speech. Gatsby's sort of the same way, where his smile and visage is so genuine that it's almost demanding that you bring out the best version of yourself deep within your heart. So his level of character is so high that it is demanding that you present your heights to match it. It is something so great that you have no other ability than to present equal greatness. So he's literally bringing the best out of Nick, is what Nick is trying to convey. Gatsby is a character who brings other people to the heights of their being and demands a sort of genuine excellence from them. A very good template for someone who you might aspire to be. Inspire people through your actions that they might be better than they think they are today. And you're inspiring them to strive forward towards a certain greatness that perhaps you forgot that you even had in yourself. But just by me showing up, I'm reminding you that you're better than you are currently, and you could strive towards something higher. The character of Gatsby, that's the symbols, that's the vision here. And what else do we have? It says, Chicago was calling him on the wire. He excused himself with a small bow that included each of us in turn. So Gatsby's quickly pulled away from a phone call from Chicago. He also, throughout the book, gets phone calls from Detroit and Philadelphia, always different city names, and there's always phone calls. These things call him away, and they're happening within the background, but no direct mention ever occurs about what the conversations on the phone might have been. Small detail to note. And it says, Nick is taking further note of Gatsby, saying, Gatsby was standing alone on marble steps and looking from one group to another with approving eyes. His tanned skin was drawn attractively tight in his face, and his short hair looked as though it were trimmed every day. I could see nothing sinister about him. I wondered if the fact that he was not drinking helped to set him off from the guests, for it seemed to me that he grew more correct as the fraternal hilarity increased. So he's saying, as the chaos of the room increases, Gatsby appears more and more and more calm. Gatsby appears so calm because he's a man that doesn't drink. In this economy, a man who doesn't drink, prohibition, when alcohol is banned, making it more delicious and desirable than ever, we find a man who is in the midst of a party that he threw himself with a variety of probably the highest quantity of alcohol you can imagine on the earth, and he drinks none of it? What? Yet another contradiction of character. We're at a wild party with a man who seems not to like a party. There's a variety of alcohols and likely drugs as well, with the man who does neither. He's a complete ascetic in a world of heathenistic splendor. Very interesting. I'd like to take a moment to say, hey, I myself don't drink at all, never will. And I like to see that done. I think it's a very admirable characteristic when you're in a nightclub of sorts and you're trying to communicate people and find and build connection when in the space of a variety of intoxicated, sorrowful people. That's going to make you terribly uncomfortable being around strangers and all these flashing lights and this loud music around you. You're going to want to drink and you're going to want to hide and mask your feelings. But I think true strength is shown through one who abstains. The ascetic is something of the most admirable quality that one might be able to find. To avoid all sort of temptations that the modern world might bring to you and simply walk away from it, perhaps may be one of the most inspiring things one can do in such a space. So, what are some more quotes? I wanted to explain that I'd hunted for him early in the evening and apologized to him. And he says, oh, don't mention it. Don't give it another thought, old sport. The familiar expression, old sport, held no more familiarity than the hand which reassuringly brushed my shoulder. And don't forget, we're going up in the hydroplane tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. Then the butler, behind his shoulder, Philadelphia wants you on the phone, sir. So the last sort of conversation with Gatsby is, Nick, hey, I really wanted to see and hang out with you. Don't worry about it. It's fine. We'll hang out tomorrow. And he uses this word, old sport. That's Gatsby's thing. Every time he sees a person, oh, heavens, old sport. Oh, come hither, old sport. Let me take care of you, old sport. Ah, old sport, come here. Sort of thing. So he says old sport quite a bit, which is his habit of speaking. And this is sort of, it sort of looks like this man is creating a godlike persona to interact with the world, where he's trying to seem more elegant than he may be in reality. And it's this persona that he's so careful about protecting, as if not that he wants attention to him, but he wants attention in general. And he wants to be able to control the attention and only let certain parts of him be known to the world, which is interesting. And then finally, we talk to Jordan again, and Nick's saying, who is he? Do you know? Oh, he's just a man named Gatsby. Where's he from? What does he do? Now you're started on the subject. Well, he once told me he was an Oxford man. I don't know. I just think he went there. And Nick is saying, you don't know he went to Oxford? He went to one of the highest ranking universities in the world, and you just think that? You don't know it? You don't have any evidence? And it's sort of like Jordan was saying that in the same respect as, oh, I don't know, he went to Oxford. Same thing as, oh, I don't know, he killed someone. There's no real depth there. So again, even Jordan, I think she's kind of a liar. Doesn't really know anything about this guy at all. I thought she did. I thought she said they were friends. Oh, this is weird. And then I think either Jordan or Nick says this. I have it highlighted again. I like large parties. They're so intimate. At small parties, there isn't any privacy. So again, Jordan confirms that in a sea of strangers, she feels the most at home. She feels the most intimate with a group of people who has no idea who she is in reality. So we can see Gatsby trying to project a certain persona on the world, Jordan surrounding herself with people that don't even know her, Nick looking for connection and all of this sea of sort of meaningless and nothingness, all of the marriages of people in the book falling apart. Can we truly be intimate with people? Can we truly find connection in these spaces? Would you want to find connection? Do the characters really genuinely want to find connection? Try to answer me and let me know in the comments below, but I want you to keep that in mind. Who's looking for connection? How can it be formed in these spaces? What makes these characters feel the most intimate? Are these normal places that people would feel intimate? And how can they go about creating a connection? Do you think there will be a connection? Or rather, why is there such a lack of connections? How did we get here exactly? And where is here? Those are some questions I'd like you to think about as you read this chapter. Thanks so much for coming along on today's talk, and I will see you tomorrow for Chapter 4. Bye.